Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully you were able to connect with old friends and make some new connections during our break. I'm very excited now to segue into our panel of individuals with lived experience as provider leaders in the system. And I'm going to go through and do brief introductions, and then I'm going to turn it over to each individual to talk a little bit about their organization and specific areas of focus, and then we'll get into some specific questions. Toward the latter part of this, we will open up for audience participation and certainly encourage questions and dialogue, just like our last session. And also, Sam Shafer has some slides as she's talking about her organization. After that, we'll kind of close down the slideshow for a little bit and just have some dialogue. So I'm going to start by introducing Sam Shafer. She's the individual in the center of the table here. Sam has spent her entire career in behavioral health, most recently actually in December 2021, coming up on a full year of leading the integrated services for behavioral health. And she was appointed to that position by the board of directors almost a year ago. She spent her entire career in behavioral health, most recently as chief operating officer of the organization, where she's demonstrated exceptional leadership for 7 years prior to becoming the executive director. She led the organization and its staff through expanded telehealth services during the COVID-19 surge. She's helped to protect the behavioral health needs of clients and customers across 14 Ohio counties, and she has done much to help to contribute to the financial health of the organization through that very trying time. Sam has also led the integrated services through successful CARF accreditation, which provides international recognition of the organization's commitment to continually improving services, encouraging feedback, and serving the community. Sam has also served as a Governor DeWine appointee to the Ohio Children's Services Transformation Advisory Council. And for those of you who were here last year, that was a subject of her presentation at that point. But she ends that term next July. Sam has a Master of Social Work from Ohio University with a focus on rural health care, and she's a licensed independent social worker with supervisory credentials. Next, and I'm just going to do some brief introductions here. Next, Dwayne Casares is visiting with us today from Columbus. He is a MSW, licensed independent social worker, also with supervisory credentials, and Dwayne is the CEO of Directions for Youth and Families. He's held this position since 2011, and prior to that, he served as the clinical director, working his way up since starting with the organization in 1990. Dwayne's strong social work background and unshakable ethics are the foundation for his work. Under his direction, Directions for Youth and Families has grown to be one of the leading mental and behavioral health providers to Central Ohio youth and their families. The agency was named one of 5 nonprofits to watch in 2020 by the Columbus Foundation and was recognized as the 2017 United Way Champion of Children. Nationally, Dwayne has been a leader in advancing trauma-informed care. He's spoken at the White House, New York City Public Schools, Bridge Housing Corporation of San Francisco, Boston University Law School, and many more organizations about trauma-informed care and his agency's outreach model. Dwayne has met with government, local, and national leaders to share the organization's transferable community transformation model, which is a collaborative approach to addressing poverty and neighborhood redevelopment without gentrification. Additionally, Dwayne serves as a presenter, trainer, consultant, panelist, CEU provider, and educator for numerous organizations, court systems, schools, businesses, and conferences. Dwayne gives back to the community through his service with several organizations, including the National, is that Crittenden? I don't have my glasses on, which I should have done. Leadership Team, the Executive Board of United Way of Central Ohio, the President's Panel of the Center for Healthy Families, Executive Board of the Human Services Chamber, and Executive Committee of Provider Leadership Association. In 2018, Dwayne was honored at The Ohio State University. We shouldn't talk about this today. No, I'm just joking. With the prestigious College of Social Work Alumni Hall of Fame Distinguished Career Award. He was featured in the 2014 edition of Who's Who in Latino Columbus. He also has a monthly segment on Columbus Perspective, addressing community and mental health issues on 97.1, the Fan radio station of the Ohio News Network. Dwayne performs with his son's band for concert events benefiting his organization. So welcome here to Dwayne. And then last but not least, we have Teresa Kane. Teresa, oh, thank you. This one's in 14-point font, so. So years ago, I worked for a cabinet director who wanted all of his briefing documents for the governor in 14-point font, and I thought, this is so stupid, but here I am, and I need it now. Teresa is a registered nurse, Ohio certified prevention consultant, and a licensed chemical dependency counselor. She holds 2 associate degrees from Hocking College, a bachelor's degree in behavioral health care, and a master's degree in public administration, both from Ohio University. Teresa has worked for Perry Behavioral Health Choices Incorporated for 35 years. She served the last 10 years as the executive director. In her leadership role, she expanded their programming to include a full continuum of care, which is almost unheard of in rural settings. Some of her other accomplishments include 2 state exemplary prevention awards, 2 national exemplary prevention awards, a Friend of Recovery Award, the Joyce Smith Nursing Award, Judith Maxwell Nursing Award, and the Ohio Distinguished Law Enforcement Civilian Leadership Award from the Attorney General, and CEO of the Year from her trade association. Teresa serves on the boards of the Perry County Cancer Alliance, the Perry County Home, the Ohio Council, the Ohio Women's Network, the Ohio Alliance of Recovery Providers, Family and Children First Council, and several Perry County-based coalitions. So as you can discern here, none of these people sleep because they're so busy. But we do appreciate them taking just a little bit of time to be with us today. So to kick things off, I've asked each of them to share a little bit more detail, just a few more minutes about their specific organizations, and then we're going to launch into some questions that focus on provider leadership insights and opportunities in this challenging time that Teresa has outlined for us earlier today. So Sam has a few slides. We're going to start with her, and then let's see here. Let me just pull this up, and you can come on up, or folks can stay at the table, whichever your preference is.
I'm only going to stand up here while I do the slides. Hello, everybody. Sam Shafer. So I want to mention that when I started 8 years ago at Integrated Services, we were actually Integrated Services of Appalachian, Ohio, because at that point we had only served Appalachian counties, and so we've grown quite a bit. But as Tracy mentioned, I'm not from Athens or this area. I actually was born and raised in Knox County, but I had a great teacher at OU that convinced me that serving rural Appalachia was the way to go, Dr. Greenlee. And I've been here ever since, and so I just want to give a shout out to him because I think, the teachers, OU, OSU, all those that are in the space, it matters when you talk to us about the things that, matter to you. I remember him telling stories about his family, what the work meant to him, and it really is what drove me to stay in this region for my entire career. So just wanted to give a shout out to the educators in the room. So we are now doing so many things that I find it hard to be concise, and I was asked to do this in 2 to 3 minutes, so I just wanted to give a few visuals of who we are as an organization. So what you'll see now is Integrated Services. We are now, as of, actually, it has fluctuated a couple people. Next Monday, we will be over 500 team members strong, which is exciting. The thing I want to say about that number is that due to 2 new programs, a third of that workforce has been hired within the last year. And so this lived experience with workforce is it's very personal to us. We are now currently serving 21 counties in Ohio. Not every county, services in every county vary. Some of the counties you'll see moving up towards the northeast of Ohio, those are Ohio Rise, so that is one of our new programs, and that may be the only service we're providing the care coordination in that space. But growing on a regular basis. And I just wanted to, in terms of people served, we were close to 11,000 people over the last year. Again, we have many things, as I know the other providers in the room offer lots of supports for people in their communities. So if I was going to oversimplify who we are as an organization, I would put us into two categories: home and community-based services, behavioral health services, right? So we focus on and have our entire existence with taking the services and support people need to them versus asking them to come into a space. Now we have spaces as well so that people can come, and there are services that are delivered in the different offices in every county that we're supporting, but we really want to make sure that we focus on making sure we're reducing barriers to getting care and taking that to individuals where they live. The other part, and I'll go through, you can read these, I'm not going to read the slides because I'll go through a couple more. The other part of what we do is housing access and development. So we hold several grants and partnerships that support us in helping those who are currently homeless or unsheltered in finding housing. We also have a community development branch that is developing transitional, affordable, and permanent supportive housing, and as well as housing preservation. So there have been several projects where there's one in Athens County where a place where, as an intern, I remember at OU serving individuals that lived in this Carpenter Hall. It was at risk of becoming student housing, and so individuals I'd served who still lived there were going to be dislocated, or they were going to have to move out of that space, and they were going to have to find new homes, and that had been their home for years and years and years. And so, you know, we are proud to say that we got to be part of the project that, with many, many partners, that allowed that housing to stay here in Athens County, and that's just one of many. So just quickly, I'll go through a couple. These are just peer services, as we talked about. I want to give a call out to something that Teresa said around, I would like us to move away from, or move into a space where peer services is truly considered something that is equitable within this workforce. It is not in terms of reimbursement, it is not in terms of how we support those individuals and how we name the work that they do on an everyday basis. So I think we have some work to do in that space. The other new program, Ohio Rise, was one. Another new program that we opened in this past year was a youth residential program. So here in Athens County in Nelsonville, Ohio, we have a 16-bed youth and family center that is to support youth with complex mental health conditions and supporting their family and understanding how they can tend to them, and so they can all be safe and healthy together in their homes. So that is all. Thanks.
Dwayne, we'll ask you to share next. You're welcome to come up here, or you can use that mic. It's live. And
Directions for Youth and Families. We're in Columbus, Ohio. We only serve Franklin County. Let me just say, overall, I would describe us as a mental health agency. So we have over 50 licensed therapists, counselors, and social workers. I'm happy to hear about the outreach services because for 40 years, we have only done our counseling in the homes. It's in the homes, in the schools, in the communities. We think that just gets rid of barriers of transportation and childcare. And quite honestly, the kids that we serve, which we serve over 7,000 in our counseling programs, they're not going to go to some traditional mental health agency once a week for therapy. It's just not going to happen. We have a lot of trauma programs. We have worked with many agencies nationally on trauma and specifically on the ACEs tool. We don't think the present ACEs tool is sensitive to inner city issues, particularly for kids and inner city people of color. So we've been working with 12 different agencies in 12 different states about relooking at that and perhaps adding to that. We also do the ARC model. So we brought in the Justice Institute out of Boston to train all of our staff for 3 years. We worked with Case Western for 3 years on resiliency. So when we talk about that we are trauma informed, we just didn't attend a training. We actually went full tilt in. We also have 2 after-school centers. One of them is being turned into a community restoration model. It was modeled after the trauma-informed community building model of Bridge Housing Corporation at Potrero Hill in San Francisco. They actually agreed to turn over their research to us 3 years ago because they like our model better. It addresses all 5 social determinants of health. We'll be opening up the new center in May. We have 23 nonprofit partners, so this really will be a one-stop shop. We are really grateful for the partners. We will be addressing all 5 social determinants of health really in a multi-generational model. So that's our agency.
Hi everyone, Teresa Kane with Perry Behavioral Health Choices. I tell a lot of folks, I usually start out by saying I'm in the business of dealing with pennies. And I think we could all have been walking down the street before and finding a penny discarded, and I'm one of those people that will stop and pick them up. When I worked in counseling, I used to collect those. I loved them if they were dirty and gritty and scratched up and had dings and damages, because I would gift those to my clients. I would put a note with them and tell them when they would leave treatment to open it when they needed to hear from me. So I would always have a penny taped in there, and I would explain how you've often been walked on, overlooked, discarded, thrown away intentionally, overlooked by so many folks. That's my business. I deal with folks that have been there, have felt that way, have been discarded, have been cut off, have been discounted, have been thrown away. And my message to them is always, but you always had value. You always had value, and that's the business that I deal in. I deal with humans. I deal with people that always had value. It's just sad to me that sometimes people don't know that they have value. And I think that really happens in the Appalachian culture, because it is a culture of poverty. And I think that pennies make it appropriate, and that's what I work with, is pennies. My budget reflects that very much so. But anyway, I've managed in Appalachia. I started out as director 10 years ago and have grown to a full continuum of care within 10 years. And that's because I understand poverty. I understand the Appalachian culture, because I realize that I don't have the resources to do everything by myself. And I think that's the wonderful gift of growing up in an area like this, because you realize you need other people. Now, as people, we need other people, but also as an agency, you need other folks. You need to share resources, because if you don't share resources, you're not going to make it. And I have partnerships with lots of folks in this room, and my agency wouldn't be where we're at if it weren't for the partnerships. So we have to rely on each other, which is why a lot of my workforce secrets, that comes from growing our own, encouraging our folks, being a mentor, reaching out. I promote people that don't have the educational qualifications for the job in hopes that they'll one day be able to aspire and get to that. So we do a lot of things like that in-house, and growing our own is really important. So much so, and education is such a highlight, because of the work that I've done with Ohio University over the years. One of the things that I have implemented is classrooms in some of my new buildings. All of my buildings have a classroom space for students. I'm very happy to say that we get all the nursing students for their mental health clinicals through Perry Behavioral Health, because they get a full continuum of care. They get exposed to mental health issues and substance use disorder clients, that they can get an education from a very small campus located on Main Street in New Lexington, Ohio, which nobody's ever heard of until they come to our area. So we're really proud of our partnership with the health sciences and certainly with the university. So we expose folks to what it is that we have to offer and what they can learn, and how they can make a difference in the lives, because they meet people that like I mentioned, that they meet our pennies, and they have a heart for helping people. So it's really an amazing thing. My organization, because we're in the people business and we're a family-friendly organization, we understand real life scenarios in poverty. Sometimes you don't have a backup sitter because, mom's sick and you can't pay for someone to keep your kids. So it's okay for my employees to bring their kids to work. If they're able to be in a room quiet by themselves, they can bring their kids, or they have to have somebody that is on the job that will help keep an eye on their kids. So we really promote a family-friendly atmosphere. And to that, one of the things that we really echo is we're family friendly. And I think we underestimate the value of language match in our organizations. I'm always quick to say we're family. Welcome to the PBHC family to all the new employees. Welcome to the PBHC family to our interns and to our students. I think that's really important. If you want to promote a certain culture in your organization, you need to language match it. You need to let folks know what do you want to be called? What do you want your organization to be called? We all have tags that say, what pronouns we want. Let's use some of those pronouns for our organization. We're a family. We're family friendly. We care about people. Dignity and respect is certainly valued among all things with the people that we serve. We don't allow any derogatory terms. We don't call people addicts. That's inappropriate because they're more than their illness. So we do a lot with language match, but just a few other things that we offer to prove that we're family friendly. We're too small for FMLA, but we offer it anyway. You only have to have FMLA if you have 100 employees, but we grew from 12 or 16 employees at the time when I took over. We now have 76 employees that are full-time. So we've had good fortune. We still have open positions, but having a family-friendly atmosphere helps. And part of that, you can't be family-friendly if you don't help people with their children. So we do have a JFS licensed daycare center on our campus. That was one of the goals that we had for our parents, because we're hearing that a lot of the folks that we hire come from backgrounds where they need extra help, or they grew up with addiction in their family or mental health issues in their family, and they don't have trustworthy family members that they can leave their children with. So that's the thing that we kept hearing over and over. It took us a couple of years to get there, but we're very, very proud to offer free daycare, not only to our employees, but to our clients. They need a safe place to leave their children as they work on their own issues and help themselves get a little bit better. And during COVID, one of the things Tracy had asked us to speak about, what have you done differently as a result of COVID? COVID created a lot of panic for families. So one of the things we did was we opened a homework help classroom. I had my prevention people who weren't getting out and doing audiences anymore, weren't able to get out in the schools. So I put them to work in our activity center, and we bought a bunch of desks or little folding tables from Sam's Club at a very low expense, and each child had a private space, and we had our construction team build some COVID barriers, and each child had a little classroom space to themselves. But all my parents were able to show up and help people that needed that help that day. Our waiting list isn't that long. Our waiting list, if you call us, we're going to get you in that day, and you're going to see one of our peers, or you're going to see a community health worker the same day. You don't have to make an appointment at our agency. You can show up, and we're going to get you services. Somebody's going to be there to help you, because we realize that you turn someone away, you may not get another chance. And any of you that have worked with folks in addiction, you know that second chances are hard to come by these days. I mean, I've seen that change a lot in my days in this field, that it only takes one relapse and then they're gone. So we don't have a waiting list for that purpose. It might take a little longer. We do have a waiting list at our residentials. We do have a men's residential. We have a women's residential. We have men and women's recovery housing. We have employment housing, which is a little bit different, a partnership with Jobs and Family Services that has been very successful. We have prevention programs. We have adjunct services, because we know that counseling alone's not enough. So we're engaging people with EMDR. We have a new grant for transcranial magnetic stimulation, and if you're interested in that, I would talk your ear off. I love it, because if we're not healing the brain, we need to work on healing the brain so people can make significant changes in their lives. So we do have a grant from the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services to provide transcranial magnetic stimulation. If we want different results, we're going to have to do something different. So I'm a believer in that. So thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. And I think you started to get into some of the ways in which Perry Behavioral Health Choices is set apart in terms of, you know, you're thinking about family and using that paradigm with your staff. Each of the leaders on this panel was invited to talk about, you know, a little different circumstance that they have, and I'd like to turn attention to Sam at this point. I know you talked about the huge staffing increase that had to occur as a result of Ohio Rise in the last year or so. And just wondering if you can share some insights from that journey, and I'm sure it was quite a significant journey. You know, the good, the bad, the ugly, recognizing that you had to go through kind of on steroids a lot of what folks are looking at on a daily basis here.
Can you all hear me okay? No? Closer? Is that better? Okay, it's going to be weird in my face. The first thing I want to say, we're just meeting each other today, but I want to say that I love when we talk about partnerships. I remember reaching out to Teresa one day because it was someone personal to me that needed residential care, and she answered my phone call and helped me walk through the steps, right? Because it's a partner that I've worked with so long, and I respect her and the work that her organization does. And I love that we have partnerships that feel like that in the region, where we can reach out in that way and know that even someone that, you know, personally in my life, I trusted that organization with my care because I know how that they'd showed up for other people in the region. So I just wanted to give that call out. So thank you. Okay, so we're learning. So everything that I'm going to say right now is like in motion in terms of what we think may possibly be working. So the thing that was exciting about today is just to hear what other people are doing and to kind of share in some of the ideas. So I don't know if I have time, but I have like 4 points. Because it's hard to follow Teresa because she's Lampel, she's got all the research, she's got all the solutions. I continue to say that everything she said is exactly what we should be doing. There's nothing on her list that I disagree with. So we could really all be done at the end of the day. But I'm going to share a few things that I'll call out past that. So my first point is retention before recruitment. We talk a lot about recruitment, and if we cannot have an industry where we take care of people, then I don't want to recruit anybody to it. So that's an important point that continues to come home. And obviously it's not that simple, and we need to do both at the same time, but we have to focus more on retention and how we get people to actually believe that they're cared for as they do this work of caring for other people. So a few things around retention. This is not an exhaustive list, but just some ideas we've had that are being formed is we want to align our benefit packages with things that support health outcomes, the same as for those that we are trying to tend to. So an example would be paid paternal leave, looking not only at those who are biologically expanding their families, but who are looking at adoption. Legal custody of kin. We know that happens a lot in our space. And so as a state, we can't continue to say that we have poor health outcomes of our mothers and our babies and then do nothing about it as employers. So that's one way. Making sure that we're fighting with our insurance coverage carriers on making sure there's 100% mental health coverage for everyone on our workforce. That's no easy feat. I just learned it. As Tracy said, I'm brand new in the CEO role. I was a social worker. I didn't know how hard some of this stuff would be, but fighting to make sure that there's not barriers to your own staff having access to the services you're trying so desperately to get into the communities. You want to constantly be examining what does our culture, our company culture need now? What does our team culture need now? Because what it needed before COVID and what it needs now is different. So we're investing in a lot of surveys, focus groups, and third-party experiences with our staff, consumers, and partners to say, like, how are we doing and how can we do better? So when I started this role, there have been 2 questions that guided me from the beginning and guide me now, and that is, how are we doing with tending to and caring for the people we committed to serving, and how are we doing with tending to and caring for each other? And if we can continually be looking at those 2 questions, then I think we're moving in the right direction. So again, just a couple more points on retention is going to the business side. We have to think about overhead different in the nonprofit world, right? We're sort of lifted up as keep your, we got to make sure that we're in this scarcity model, keep your overhead really small. But what that also impacts is how much you invest in your people, how much you invest in training. So as we move towards working towards an organization that is like a training, like we think about training hospitals, right, where you come in and you get trained up as a nurse and you get to continue in practice. We need to think about ourselves in that same way, and we have to start investing differently. And that feels really hard right now, but it's something that we have to examine a little bit more. Looking at succession planning all the time, I am now following a founder and learning a lot of things, right? So what I would love to see is not just the CEO positions, but every leadership position. How are we actually planning for? Who's going to make sure this work continues and care continues without interruption? So constant succession planning throughout the entire organization. And then lastly is we can never pay people enough. So what we have to do is use our data. We have to start showing the impact that people have through the work that they do, because it's why we all came to the table anyways. So if all I can show someone is what they billed for that week, of course they don't want to stay. But if I can say over the last month, you helped this many people get housing, or you connected with this many people, now we're starting to share with people what they're doing, and that helps us all stay. Okay, so that's retention benefit. Transparency is my second point. I am very humbled by this new role and what I can actually do as a single human in making an impact. So the more I can share with the organization as an entire team, the more transparency I have around what is working and what is not, what is hard and what is easy for me to do, it becomes something we're all building together and that we can all be in conversation about. Now that's a balance I'm learning, because you don't want to scare people with things that may be scary to all of us. But for example, one of the things I did last week that felt really hard is I've been with this organization 8 years. For the first time in 8 years, we had a process of doing revenue sharing. So at the end of the year, we would share what we had, a certain amount, with staff that we felt comfortable being able to do. It's the first year in my new role where I had to say we're not doing that this year, because we had to invest in the organization differently, and it was also a harder year, right? But then I get to have conversations around how we did invest in each other, right? It's policies that we changed that support health outcomes, like paid parental leave, some of the benefits we were able to add. So again, it's difficult, and I don't know that I'm doing it 100% right, but we are trying to look at more transparency so that we are an entire team in the conversation versus just a small group of us at the top. Third, I only have 4, in case Tracy needs to cut me off, is we have to think, and this has already been talked about, we have to think about who is the workforce. I appreciate the question around how do we make sure we maintain quality while we're also coaching people up and calling new people into the workforce. So I appreciate that. And I also want us to remember that our research still indicates that the outcomes in our field are based off of relationship more than the actual model that we used. So yes, let's get people concrete skills, but let's remember that the relationship, if we're taking care of our workforce and they're healthy and they're showing up and they're building relationship, we're already 60% or better on our outcomes. So making sure we're keeping that in mind. And so lastly is just, Teresa talked about the partnership. This one's harder, I think, in terms of workforce, and this is maybe even harder to talk about, is we've got a lot of organizations doing really great things. We are also at a place where we cannot all continue to exist and be healthy. So we have to start thinking, again, on the more business aspect of staff and workforce development. How do we create strategic alliances? There are already organizations across the state that are merging that allow them to be stronger because they do similar things. This is a harder conversation, but it is one that I think we have to kind of call into the space and talk about how can we support each other in doing better and just being stronger. Because it's not about me as a CEO wanting to preserve my job or how great my organization is. It's how do we actually make sure we have the workforce we need to take care of people. Because the last comment I will make is we give a lot of statistics, but I was talking to many people during break. We are essential workforce. So what that means is when we don't have enough people, people die, right? And that, so we can't get we can't just let this be about all the statistics and how bad how hard it is to get people through the door. It really matters, right? If we lose ER docs, if we, these things really matter, because if we can't figure it out together, more people die, and we have to take that seriously. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Our third panelist this morning is Dwayne, and as indicated during the introduction, Directions for Youth and Families serves Franklin County. So you may be wondering, why is he here? Because he does not serve Appalachian counties, but I've always been really intrigued by his commitment to trauma-informed practices as it relates to his staff. And the organization serves an area, we were talking about restoration without gentrification. There's a lot of community trauma, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of really tough stuff, including violence, in the areas where he serves. And in light of that, he said to me a number of years ago, we can't truly serve people unless we're serving the people who are serving those individuals, our own staff, and making an investment there. And so I'd appreciate, Dwayne, if you would, share about the investment that you made with your staff and how that has impacted your ability to serve others over time.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. Some of it starts with the philosophy with our agency. We think walking in and out of people's lives is serious business. We all know that. And far be it for any of us to create more damage than was there before they walked in our door. That's a whole big issue in itself to address. The healthier your staff are, the better services they're going to be able to provide. So when we start looking at these things, we always talk about we're in service to our clients, and we talk about being in service to them because we serve them. It puts us in the right position. Society judges the people that we work with enough. We're the ones who are supposed to understand, so that's why we serve them. We can't do that unless our staff are healthy. So we have a whole process within our organization. We call it the second most important person. We started this probably 15 years ago. The most important person to our agency is the people we serve. They are number one. Therefore, the second most important person is our frontline staff. They are the tools we use to serve the most important person. So our philosophy as an organization is that I don't care what department you're in, I don't care what your title is, even myself, all of our jobs, IT, HR, business, everything, all of our job is to make the frontline workers' job easier, because they are the tools we use to work with the most important person. With that comes an awful lot of different regulations and guidelines that we employ at our agency that weren't in practice before. We really kind of reject a business model of management. And I think we have to. I don't think some business practices belong in the human service field. Our outcome is people, their outcome is profit. Therefore, we cannot get there using the same tools. We have different outcomes. There have to be different paths. And the biggest difference that I think between business and what human services should do is a difference between management by surveillance and management by support. Management by support is a lot more difficult. It takes a little bit more work, but in the end, if you have a healthier work environment, you're going to end up slowing down the leaving rate, or you'll be able to retain your workers more. And right now, retention is huge. If you cannot retain your employees, you're already starting from behind. We worked with the Osteopathic Heritage Foundation. They ended up doing an evaluation through Mental Health America in 2017, and we just had our reevaluation on workplace well-being. So we know it was very validating. We just got our results about 3 weeks ago. They told us beforehand, this Ocumetrics group, that, and what they did is they survey 100% of your staff. They in focus groups, like 60 to 70% of our staff participated. So it's a pretty comprehensive thing that takes a couple months to go through. They gave us our results and said, we're letting everybody know beforehand that everybody's numbers went down because of the pandemic, except for one agency, and that was yours. Not only did they not go down, these are the highest numbers we've ever seen in our history. We got a 5.69 on a scale of 6 in interpersonal relationships, and they said it's the highest score they've ever seen in any category. We are extremely, extremely intentional about putting our workers first. our rate of unemployment compared to the rest of the state, our turnover rate is less than half of what the state average is. And it's because I think we focus so much on staff, on the culture within the agency, on being a supportive environment. And that means incorporating a lot of different, when we first started this whole thing, this was back in paper days, you could not create a new form without getting rid of an old one, just to make your job easier and to make your frontline stats harder. We do not create policy and procedures because somebody did something wrong. I call it the Tom and Sue rule of policy and procedure. We deal with Tom and Sue. We are not going to create another obstacle for everyone to have to jump through because Tom or Sue did something wrong. We have to address the mental health issues of we have an entire self-care committee. It's actually great. We have a sensory room that people can go in. The massage chair is actually awesome. I love it. Anybody can go there at any time, and it really is to promote self-care. We really deal with toxic people within the workforce because, you know, I call these the walking wounded. These are the folks that go cubicle to cubicle talking about how bad morale is, and they promote the us versus them environment without ever taking ownership that they're the person who is going cubicle to cubicle, office to office, talking about how bad morale is. It usually takes about 3 years to transform a culture, but once you get there, it self-cleans itself. Right now, if anybody were to start to do that, they're going to be addressed by other staff members in a helpful manner. I used to teach race relations and culture diversity at Ohio State, and that ends up getting a touchy issue with some people. They get nervous when you start talking about those things. We recognize the fact that we're all products of our environment, and all of us are going to screw up. If you think you know everything about every other culture, you need to check yourself. That's not going to happen. So when somebody says something that you think, ooh, boy, that was kind of edgy, I'm not so sure, that felt a little offensive, you have a choice to make. You can go and talk about them and gossip about them at the drinking fountain or the mailbox, or you can contribute to their growth and development like a professional should. I don't care what people do out in the community. I do care what you do in the workplace. So those things, our Evolving Together committee is specifically to talk about race relations and culture diversity issues. It's an open discussion. It's a very healthy discussion. I'll tell you recently, the person who oversaw that committee said, look, I come from rural Ohio. I grew up in a family that says a lot of things that just wouldn't be appropriate. I was afraid to come to this committee, but never have I felt so welcome and so open. I believe we have to do that as a field. We have to be committed to each other's growth and development. That kind of support, I think, is critical. From a benefit standpoint, we do the same thing. We have expanded our benefits. My goal someday is to be able to say in community mental health, our medical benefits are free. And then we can draw more people. I think if we don't start saying things like that, we're never going to get there. We have to assertively start to put some things on the table and differentiate ourselves from other people. And I don't think that that means embracing business practices. I truly do not. Again, that surveillance that comes from businesses, and here's the difficult part, I think, in the nonprofit world. All of our boards are made of business people, and we need them because we need the money. But they want you then to employ business practices in order to run your agencies. I had to be very intentional with our board at one point, and this was probably about 8 years ago, and say, this is a board of surveillance. It does not match the culture of our agency, which is an agency of support. There are practices that we must change on a board level. I don't need you guys to check boxes and vote yes and okay certain things. What I need you to do is give me part of your talents. I have a one-person HR department, a one-person IT department. We all have one-person departments. Or when the board says do something, it falls on us, and we're the ones that have to carry it out. I openly told our board, I know this isn't what you signed up for, but I don't need seat fillers. I don't need resume builders. I need your skill set. I need your gifts. And I need you to contribute to us. And that may not be where you're at in your life, and I will take anyone's resignation at this point just because I know that that's not what you signed up for. But if you're going to stay with us, you have to assist us in our growth and development, and we will assist you in your growth and development. You have to become a board of support. We have to move away from some of these surveillance activities, because I don't think that it works for our staff at all. Just not at all. When Mental Health America told us that your numbers are off the board, we've only seen this once, and the last time that we saw it was 5 years ago when we saw your agency. That's the only time that we've seen this number. It is truly validating about our approach, which we think is effective management in creating a healthy work environment. That this approach really, if you embrace it, it's very difficult for some managers to embrace it. It's very difficult. I remember our IT person, when they first came under me when I was clinical director, our IT person said, it would be really easier if, on our department, if everybody would fill out this half-slip form on every client. I'm thinking, we serve 7,000 clients. That's 7,000 half-slips. Our intake person looked at our IT guy and said, oh, Mark, you've now worked under Dwayne. He has rules about things like that. If it means make your job easier or the frontline workers' job easier, they win. You're going to have to find a different way. But that's the commitment we have to make to the people who work on the front line. We are there to support them because they are the tools that work with the people in the community. And the people in our community deserve the best service they possibly can. That doesn't happen if your staff are stressed. It doesn't happen if your staff don't feel supported. We have to be focused in on the mental health of our workers and the support of our workers if we want to have the best service we can. And it has showed at our agency, just because our retention rate is so good, and I hope that continues. We still have vacancies, but our vacancies, I think, from last year went from 17 to now we're down to 8. We are continuing to keep pushing that. We are not as bad as some other agencies in Columbus, which some of them are at half workforce, which just puts a stress on the entire system. And in the end, it's not in the best interest of all the people that we serve.
Thank you. Before we go to dialogue with all of you, I just wanted to note, I think, a thematic consistency here of support. And Dwayne, you talked about support versus surveillance. Sam, you talked about actually leveraging the data that you have to demonstrate how the staff are adding specific value to individuals' lives and helping to improve outcomes. And then Teresa, you talked about the concept of family and how that's a paradigm that that your organization really employs and walks that talk. I'm curious, COVID obviously, presented lots of challenges on the workforce front. And Teresa, you even talked a little bit about that initially, but I'd welcome any observations that any of you have in light of Teresa's comments about how the workforce has shifted and expectations have shifted in these last couple of years and what that's meant for you as leaders as you're focusing on recruitment and retention.
We're still finding, at Perry, we're still finding our path as far as what can we do, how have things changed. I think we're probably never going back to total in-person for anything. I think we have to change with the times. I've been very surprised by, we live in an area where transportation's obviously an issue. Our county is very rural, and it quite literally will take you probably about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes to get from one end of Perry County to the from the northern end to the southern end of Perry County. So we're a very rural, spread out area made up of many small communities, many of which do not even have a traffic light. Many do not have, internet, regular internet, broadband. I mean, there are tremendous issues and struggles. We really felt like once we had to go to all virtual sessions that we would never get folks back in the door. But what I've really learned is our folks really crave that interpersonal connection. They really crave being around other people. During COVID, all of our offices were open. We chose not to close them because we knew that people were panicked and they had no place to go. Our nurses did double duty. For a small agency, we have a nurse in every facility. All of our nurses stayed very busy, letting folks know that, practice precautions, things will be okay, encouraging, reinforcing safety was a big thing. But we kept all of our facilities open. Our peer center was probably the busiest during the height of COVID. People weren't always wearing their mask. Nurses were coming in regularly and checking, everybody was checking temperatures and all of those. Not that those things helped with everything, but we did our due diligence, but we kept everything open and moving on. And I think, for now, people need people, and especially when it comes to mental health disorders, that being cut off from everyone else has been so difficult. I know those of us in the room, many of us, when we've greeted each other, it's really nice to be back in person again. Imagine that for people that are already feeling isolated and segregated, and how important people are for their own mental health. So we're going to continue to keep services in person, residential. We're doing everything we can. We have a current case at one of our programs right now, a case of COVID in our men's residential. But we have a pretty set standard precaution right now, and some standard protocols to keep people safe. So our staff aren't freaking out about it, which is important. I will share one thing that we've had to do because of some support staff positions that have been lost. One of the things we did was we did have to shut down one of our buildings and combine. We bought bunk beds to move our residential program into our withdrawal management program so that we could get by with half of the support staff. That was a necessary function for us, because what I was finding is my support staff were coming in and saying, I'm doing everything I can. I don't want to let anybody down, but I really feel like I need a break. I'm getting snippy with the clients, or I'm getting short with people, and I know it's not okay, and I know that goes against our protocol, but I'm trying to practice self-care, but it's really hard when I'm constantly getting phone calls because someone's sick. So one of the things that we're doing is kind of bunking people in with each other as much as we can, so I can cut down on the need for my support staff. We're hurting for support staff. All of our employees, 98% of the people that work at my agency live in the community. So now, living in Perry County, you still may have a drive, and with the hills in Perry County, transportation's a constant problem. But we're doing what we can. Our clinical staff really bucked against it and said, well, we can't have two programs in the same place. It's going to cause problems. We're finding a new respect. I mean, my constant mantra was, you don't work for Evolution, you work for Perry Behavioral Health, your PBHC family. And I think that's really more true now with COVID, that we've had to make some of these adjustments. And the one thing I would encourage folks to do, I heard a few of those messages and made that tough call to support my support staff. I think that's really important. They're probably the hardest working people in your organization, the lowest paid, and the people that feel like they have the smallest voice in your organization. So I really basically reprimanded my clinical staff for not being thoughtful of their support staff and being supportive of their support staff. So I really feel like that's really brought a positive culture within our organization, and sort of a we can do this together kind of feel, because everybody's kind of heard that or seen the commercials or the posters, but I think we're starting to live that now. So COVID has taught us that we have to make adjustments, that we can deal with things, and sometimes we come out better for it. And I feel like that's what's happened in our organization. We have some plans in place, but bringing kids into our organization, everybody was are you crazy for doing this? I mean, why are you letting kids come into your organization? And I'm like, how are you going to get people in there if you can't bring their, what are they going to do with their children? So I think that we have to think about it across the board and make sure that if we're in the people business, we have to take care of our people first, but then we have to make sure that they're there for the other folks. And that includes the little people, taking care of the kids. So that's what we're doing.
Any other observations on this?
I mean, lots of things. I think what I would focus on in terms of sort of where we are after sort of shutdown and things like that related to COVID is really the recruitment of licensed staff has been the hardest. And I think it goes to something Teresa said during her talk, right, is the movement for people to go into private practice. And you can't fault people for that, right? Work-life balance, they have children, I can do it from my home. So it's not anything that we want to look down on people for making that decision, right? As we lift people up and making the decisions that are best for them and their families, that's a great decision for some to make, while it also has an impact on how we're able to serve. So, you know, like for instance, we opened our youth residential program. We've had to limit the number of youth that we've been able to serve, youth and families we've been able to serve, because we had one licensed person. She's had a beautiful little human and she's tending to that person, and we had one licensed person that determined that wasn't the fit for them. So our residential director is taking on the individual counseling, and she and I share on call every other weekend so that we can have a work-life balance. And so the recruitment of licensed staff into the programs that run 24/7 has been really challenging because there are a lot of other options in that space. The thing that we've done for, you know, the majority of our workforce are actually community behavioral health workers. They're not licensed staff, is again around transparency. So before COVID, around 97% of our services were provided in the home or community. We continued to track those trends, and we saw that they were staying around 70% while things were still opening. So we were worried that our staff may be leaning too heavily on telehealth when the preference of those we were serving may have been in person. So as we made the transition to all telehealth for a period of time, during the sort of height of COVID, we also changed some documentation that allowed those that came through the door to tell us their preference on how they wanted to be served. So going back to how do we use data and transparency with our staff, and how do we demonstrate to people the impact they're having, we can now match. So if I'm serving 30 people, and those 30 people all said that I wanted my services in person, we can now match how those services are being delivered by that care provider so that we can make sure we're actually showing up for people in the way they asked us to show up. The other thing we've had to talk about, though, is because the majority of we have had a reduction. Some people really have embraced telehealth, and in some counties that's completely available, broadband's available. So we will sustain a reduction in how much services we're doing in person probably forever, right? The world has changed. People want to have things done through telehealth. But for some of our services, that means a lower reimbursement rate is attached, right? So if we do it out of office space, that means that we also are going to have a revenue loss. Again, going to the business side, it feels weird to talk about it because we are talking about people and how we're serving. But what we've been able to show folks on our team is that that reduction is not because we're doing something wrong, right? That reduction in revenue, we can now see that we're still showing up how people have asked us to show up. We have that matching, while also as an organization, the transparency piece is that does still come at a cost that we have to figure out how we're going to sustain over time. And so we get to, again, demonstrate we're doing as people ask us to do, and also we have to figure some things out. And I think that that's been an important part of what we've been able to do.
Thank you.
I can just add real quick. So during the pandemic, our counseling services did go to telehealth. Our after-school centers never closed. When people always talked about the fact that, we're pivoting, I'm thinking you didn't pivot. You went home and worked from home. Our after-school people, I had art teachers and dance instructors and music teachers. They were making meals. We were serving 1,000 meals a day. We became warehouses with diapers and cleaning supplies. We had full families that got COVID. We had to get them groceries. They could not go out there. So about 6 weeks into the pandemic, And this is why I love our frontline staff. 6 of them came to see me, and 2 of them from 3 of our trauma programs. So Promises is for survivors of sexual abuse, COMPS is for children of murdered parents and siblings, and our VOCA program deals with kids stuck in domestic violence situations. So they came and said, look, we got to get back out there. Some of our kids, and like Promises, the average age is 7. We got to get out there. Some of our kids are in situations that aren't safe, and I'm thinking it's absolutely not. I mean, remember in the beginning of the pandemic, none of us knew what was happening here. So I said, no, we cannot, I'm not going to risk that. We cannot do that. They came back and said, come on, we got to you got to meet us halfway. You always said it's not yes or no. There's always in between, and we do promote that. So I said, okay, come up with the plan. And within 2 weeks, I came back with a plan. And so it was to see kids outside, bring your own chairs, we bought every pool noodle in Columbus because they're 6 feet long and kids don't understand what 6 feet is, so that was going to distance them. I will tell you, by the eighth week, everyone, I said, fine, we're going to do a focus group of you 6, and that's it. So once I approved the plan, they said, we have a problem. I said, what's that? They said, there's 24 of us now that want to go back out there. Boy, if that doesn't speak to the people who all of us work with, and that's why they're the most important person. On top of that, that only validates something that we've had a practice in our agency for a very long time. If clients are number 1 and your staff are number 2, they should not have to go into management to make management pay. Don't you want your most experienced people, if they want to stay front line, to be able to serve your most important? We do. We probably have a quarter of our outreach workers making management pay. I do not believe that you should have to go into management. Some of our people end up leaving our agencies because they want to make more, so they go somewhere else. They shouldn't have to do that on the front line. They should be getting what managers are getting, and we wholeheartedly support that.
I want to offer an opportunity to have our audience present a couple of questions or reaction to anything you've heard.
Hi, I'm Yuki Comstock. I'm the Associate Director of Mental Health Recovery Board, Beaumont, Harrison, Monroe County. First, I wanted to say that it was so insightful, and I was very amazed by the leadership skills that you guys present and valuing the agency, work culture. And I'm a little bit nervous to mention this, but I'm going to ask anyways. Sometimes we face agency leaders that might not have or share the same value as you guys might have. Are there any advice or any trainings or any support education that maybe we can provide to kind of encourage the similar leaderships in the community?
An easy question.
I mean, I'll take that because I've been thinking about it a lot, actually, in terms of I'll just in my own role. This is how I've been thinking about it. Again, I'm a social worker. As you saw, we're a fairly large organization, 500 employees, and the amount that we do, and the complexity of our organization continues to change. So the question I ask myself is who's responsible for telling me when the job has outgrown me? Right, when I've done the most value I can give to this organization. So I ask myself that question a lot, and I think it comes back to partnerships, not only with our ADAM boards, but other partners. I mean, I think we have to be having those it goes back to my sort of hesitant comment around strategic alliances and mergers in the future. Like, Teresa talks about our workforce and how it's turning over. Your question is a hard one, but it is one that we avoid. And, we talked about having those crucial conversations within our own organization. But if we're going to have true systems of care in our region, we cannot rely on this county by county build. We cannot rely on this organization by organization build. And we kind of talk like we're building something together, and in some places it's happening really successfully. But I think there is an enormous amount of value to really digging into some harder conversations around how we all work together. And so to directly answer your question, I'll bring it back to me. If I'm not what this organization needs, because this region needs this organization and the people serving as part of this team, then I'm looking at Adam board directors that know me personally, right? Leaders at the state level, partners that are sitting next to me. It's our responsibility to say that to each other. And I don't think that's happened in the past for lots of reasons. We didn't think we could speak to people in positions of power, but I think that is changing, and I think we need to give them an opportunity to do better instead of silently not saying anything when they are not maybe the person that needs to be in that space for that organization at that time.
Just real quickly, I think we have to do a better job of succession planning of moving our own counselors in social work into leadership positions. Again, most of our boards, nonprofit boards, have business leaders because we need the business connection. They think like business people. And when I became CEO, I think at the time, 80% of all the CEOs in Columbus were being replaced by people with business degrees. It's almost as if the people in the human service field can't run their own agencies. I don't believe that to be a truth. Just because business people say it out loud may be their truth, but it isn't our truth. And we've got to do a better job of educating our own staff and moving them into leadership positions so they will end up embracing the whole thing of a culture of support over a culture of surveillance.
Any other questions? We've got a couple minutes.
I just have another comment. I think too, I agree. When I took on this role, I expanded the board to make sure that I had people, all the people and all the experience and people that could support me in all of my places of learning, while also having to embrace that in this industry, the managed care companies are moving into a space that we either partner with them and we thrive, or we are going to really struggle. As I've grown into my role and I understand the complexities of running an organization, we have multiple grants now, federal dollars coming through, all that I have to do all that my team has to do in order to manage all of those funding streams so that we can show up for people. It's extremely complicated, while also having to prepare for what is coming through managed care and how we're going to be reimbursed in the future. And if we as organizations aren't binding together to have some say in what they're forming, right? So as managed care decides how they're going to do value-based contracting, how they're going to actually reimburse us in the future, if we're waiting for them to impose that on us, we will all struggle greatly. Versus if we come together, I think about, again, as we talk about collaboration, if we're trying to partner with, we are partnering with OU right now for the community health worker program, right? So that all new staff that come in go through that community health worker training. I have a goal in my head that I'm working through with the team right now because we can't figure out how to do it, is everyone across the board, right? We serve 21 counties. If we can consistently train the majority of our workforce in that community health worker model, now we can start looking at consistency in terms of service delivery. If we think about that in terms of how are we all binding together around similar service lines to train our people in the same ways, we have consistency not only when they're in my organization, but when they go to Teresa's, right? Or when they go to Hopewell, right? So now we're looking at service across our region differently. And so I think there's just a lot of room to come together, to have more consistency in how people can access care and how we're training up folks and how we're building that out. But also we are preparing for the future, because if we have a way of saying, this is how we train people, these are the outcomes we have, this is what you should pay us for, we're more armed and ready for managed care versus waiting for them to, and this, for all the managed care, I know we've got Humana on virtually, the partnerships can be meaningful, and they have done a lot. The residential program that we run in Nelsonville was supported by $1 million donation from CareSource, and it would not have got off the ground without that partnership and without the conversation. So it's not that they're two different worlds and they're two different languages, but we need to understand those partnerships better as well.
There's a question here in the back.
Hi, Eric again. So as I listen to you all talk, a hill that I'm willing to die on in social work education is the need for this blend of both preparing people to be direct practitioners while also continuing to prepare some more macro and leadership skills, especially at the master's level. because then those are the people for social work, for counseling, even in nursing. Then those are people that are going to go on and in 5 or 6 years, if they're great clinicians, are going to be put into leadership positions. But a great clinician does not always a great manager make, especially if they're not given the skills or the information on even where to begin looking in leadership and community and organizational development. And so I think that even on the education part, across all human professions, we can then start to do a better job of being deliberate in teaching both direct practice services as well as some of those more macro and leadership components through what we do. And I'd be curious if any of you have gone into classrooms or are willing to like partner, like if I can get your email.
I know, having gone through the Master's in Public Administration education with Ohio University, and I know that throughout our system there have been some great leaders that have come out of programs much like that, because operating a nonprofit is very different. A public institution is quite different than a for-profit type of program because of the whole support versus bottom line. So I think there's benefits to that. And I think one of the things that is lacking that kind of ties into the Adams Board question, how do we get leaders that are supportive? I think a lot of that comes from mentorship. There's a great potential, but our field hasn't embraced that. We're hiring peer mentors now. When the heck are we going to do that for, higher level staff? That's lacking. And I know there have been programs, and I do know that Ohio University had sponsored a program, and that went away just prior to COVID, and I'm not sure what happened, but I know that they did these leadership retreats and cohorts, and I think we can all get good ideas. I've jotted some notes from Dwayne here, and there's some things I'm going to steal from him. There's no doubt about it, because he hasn't been on my radar yet, but that's the wonderful thing about coming to programs like this. We need mentorship. It is a huge shift to go from being a colleague to a supervisor. That's a damn big challenge for anyone. And I don't think there's enough support for that. So I certainly would agree that colleges could probably take a lead there, but I also feel like our professional organizations, hint Teresa, might start a mentorship program. I know that the Ohio Association of County Behavioral Health Authorities do that with new directors. They have a tremendous mentorship program that you're mentored for the first year. We all need that. I mean, and I'm going to guess myself, I had a colleague that I looked up to and I had admired, and I tailored my programming much like their programming, and I reached out and called them, but I think a good leader is going to be willing to ask questions and not act like they know everything. I've got a lot to learn, and I've learned some things here already. So I think we need statewide, we could really benefit from a mentorship program that would make stronger leaders in our organization.
If I can just add something real quick. So when I first became CEO, I did not want the job. I will tell you that. I was clinical director for 17 years. And honestly, I could have retired being a clinical director. I'm a clinician, and I think that's where I belong. But what happened is when our CEO decided to take another job, actually after I scolded him and told him, where do you think you make this decision without me? We agreed to go into the sunset together. He said, I know, but he didn't know. And so he did take, which was a good move for him. I didn't want the job. I did not. But as I mentioned before, at the time, this was 2008, and with the economy, all people were coming from businesses into the human service field, and they were taking our jobs. I could not risk a business person coming in and changing our culture. I really could not. We had worked way too hard on it, or for something like that to happen. So we needed to be really assertive about it. Actually, I remember telling one of the guys who's over half of the programs and one of our youth centers, I said, look, if I get this job, you're going to have to take over my job. And he said, but I like my job. And I said, well, I liked mine too, but I'm not the only one who's going to make a sacrifice here. So, but I'll tell you, it was hard because I saw it as sales. Now I'm dealing with the business community and a bunch of funders out there who I have to go out there and really sell. and sales isn't what I am. I am a social worker. I'll tell you what clicked it for me. After about a year and a half, I honestly, raising money all the time was a total shift in job when I was a clinician. I wasn't happy with the job. I had 3 boards at the time that weren't playing nice together, and there were power struggles amongst them. So after 18 months, I had decided I'm giving this 6 more months, and if I'm still this unhappy, I'm going to step away. You know, you spend most of your awake time getting ready for work, at work, or winding down from work. It better be something you like, and it better be a healthy culture. If not, if you're a fool if you don't think that's going to carry into your personal life. It was a funny thing happened when I decided that. I didn't care about the boards, since I had 3, of how offensive I was to them. I needed 1 board. This was not functional. We wouldn't do this with family therapy. Why are we doing it now with a board? And then it started to occur to me, wait a minute, everything that I've done as a clinician to get where I'm at, I have vacated because I'm trying to please 3 different boards. And the biggest part that really clicked for me was the fundraising. I realized then that, look, the people we serve don't get to be in the rooms that we get to be in. We don't just have an obligation, we have a duty to speak on their behalf. And then, once that clicked, I thought, and I'm going to do it better than most of these others because I'm a clinician first. I am a social worker first. My wife always jokes now that when we meet people, she says, you always introduce yourself as a social worker, not a CEO, because that's how I identify. And that's who we are. And I will never walk away from that.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank these 3 panelists, not only for the time that you spent with us today, but for the leadership that you're exemplifying for the rest of the field and the work that you're doing on behalf of individuals every day. So thank you. Round of applause.